After steering a powerless space shuttle to a safe landing, Ralph turns into a walking magnet, and only he, Bill, and Pam stand in between an electricity-eating space monster and doom. Battle of the Network shows. Join Rick Brooks and Mike Kogel as they explore the TV of the 70s and 80s through hand-picked episodes of their favorite and not-so-favorite series.
Welcome to Battle of the Network shows. I'm Mike.
And I'm Rick. Hey, everyone.
And this week, we're finally getting to a show that we bumped last season, and I'm honestly kind of surprised it took us this long to get to it. And now that I've watched a bunch, and I have a feeling you feel this way too, I kind of wish we had gotten to it sooner.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way of saying it. And I also think that, may I say that I don't see this as an episode of our podcast. You know what I see this as?
What?
A scenario.
Yes.
I feel that we're going to do a scenario here.
We've doped out a good scenario.
Yes. And before we get too far into it, though, let me give a shout out to John from our Facebook group, because I posted a note about preparing for a show and having that feeling of getting into it and enjoying it, not just out of nostalgia, but because it's an actual good quality show that's entertaining. And John actually said, you know what, I think it's Greatest American Hero.
That's right. It was him on that. And
he was 100% right on that.
Someone else guessed something else. Well, it already aired, so by the time you're hearing this...
We're podcasting from the future.
Yes. I made an offhand comment about something you said in the Poor Devil episode, and Gino immediately guessed that it was Poor Devil.
Yeah.
Of all the things...
You know, we've got some pretty bright people in our Facebook group, so let's go ahead and put that out there. Come join us. You know, go to Facebook, search Battle of the Network shows. You'll see our official page, and then from there you'll be able to get to our group. Very simple to join. We got some cool people there. We love talking about 70s and 80s TV. We got lots of friends of the show in there now. We're posting clips, talking about things, so please join us. And, of course, you can always join us on our regular page, battleofthenetworkshows.com. Join us on Twitter, at BatNetShows. Instagram, you know, our YouTube page. We got an official YouTube page, all that kind of stuff.
And I'm probably going to jinx myself, but to each of these things, I've responded with a Spock GIF or GIF. The guesses.
Yes.
Him, a push in, and then he arches his eyebrow. And we're recording this a few days before the Columbo episode airs. No one has yet guessed that's going to happen, let alone it's the Leonard Nimoy episode.
Yeah.
So I feel like I've been giving clues, and we'll see if anyone picks up on that.
That's true. But yeah, it's cool that somebody was able to identify that that's what I was talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's come up before in the group, but I don't remember it. But
I know you had another comment. I don't know if it was The Greatest American Hero, but about an amnesia episode, about someone getting a hit on the head and then fixing it by getting hit on the head. And we did mention, we were vague in our little teaser episode about a superhero show we had bumped, but that's it. So I think it was just a good, it's good intuition there.
Yes. Am I that transparent, Mike?
You look pretty opaque to me.
Okay, well.
Thankfully.
Maybe if I was wearing my superpowered suit, I could be actually invisible.
Oh, maybe, yeah. If you knew you had that power.
Yeah, but I loved Greatest American Hero as a kid, so in a sense it is a little surprising that it's taken us this long to get to it.
I did like it. I don't think I've seen it since I was a kid.
Yeah, I remember FX showed it. It didn't last very long. It was on ABC, for 3 seasons, but not all of them full seasons. And then I think FX showed reruns of it.
Yeah, it's basically, the equivalent of 2 seasons.
Yeah.
In terms of episode, or not even quite 2 seasons.
Right.
Because of it started, as we've already talked about, during the strike. One of the strikes. And so that first season is only a pilot movie and 7 episodes, I think. Got really confusing because I was watching it on IMDb TV, and every time I looked at the list, like the numbering changed.
Really?
Like sometimes something would be episode 5 would be listed as episode 8, or they would still be in the right order, but then it was really bizarre.
Yeah, I think the official total is like 45 episodes, but I think that includes the Greatest American Heroine pilot. And there are also 4 episodes that were not aired originally on ABC.
Oh, jeez.
Like
4?
Yeah, 4. The show was canceled very abruptly after being bounced around the schedule a little bit. So, yeah, it was kind of a rude awakening for anybody that enjoyed the show back then.
It does make it even more surprising that, it was... in the top 20 by that one list we looked at the first season.
Right. Yeah, it seemed like it premiered well and then it moved around. It was up against maybe some popular shows, but it also seems like ABC didn't really treat it. I think it was preempted a lot, too, for things.
I don't even know if I watched it the whole time it was on. And
I seem to remember like being excited when it was on, but for some reason, not being able to watch it every week. And I don't know if it was because of other circumstances, because it wasn't on or whatever, but I really enjoyed it as a kid. But like you, I hadn't seen it in the decade since then. But it's funny because it's like everywhere now.
Right. Or portions of it are on IMDb TV. Again, one of these weird things. For some reason, season 2 isn't. It's on Tubi TV. It's on YouTube, like officially on YouTube. I'm sure it's on other places too.
It's had a couple of different DVD releases, and I actually got the DVDs years ago, but hadn't gotten around to watching them.
Yeah.
Until now.
I think it was on Hulu for a while. A lot of the Stephen J. Cannell shows seem to be all over the place.
Yeah. And I think it was on Prime Video before it got moved to IMDb TV, too. So, and Peacock has it now.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I think I told you the Tubi versions look weird. Like they're still in a 4:3 ratio, but within that they looked a little bit stretched.
Huh.
And like occasionally like a big credit wouldn't actually be cut off on the sides.
That's too bad.
So I don't know what happened there. But that's how I had to watch this episode. So
yeah. Now the DVDs, and folks, I would have been glad to lend my DVDs. It's not. I don't want people to get the wrong idea because you're saying you kind of made it sound like you were forced to watch it in subpar conditions, and you kind of were, but
more because of whatever reason it wasn't on Amazon.
Yeah, which it was originally, and we expected it would be very easy. And actually, I wanted to watch some of the episodes. Like the DVD set is not all that great. I mean, the episodes don't look all that great, and they don't have subtitles. And I like watching the stuff with the subtitles, which they do on Amazon/IMDb or whatever. But I guess maybe on Tubi, I would assume too. But the DVDs have no subtitles, which is kind of annoying.
So yeah, I'm blaming Amazon.
Okay,
Filmerize
someone's got to pay
not
for
you.
This. Oh, thank you. Yes, thank you.
Someone making me open the Tubi app again and figure out what my password was so I could make a watch list and put them on there. Yeah.
Although it's kind of funny that I have like the DVDs, but if I had a commercial, if they were on Amazon Prime, I'd probably be watching them on Amazon Prime.
Oh, yeah.
Just because it's simple. Yeah.
Even though it's a show built for commercial breaks. So
right. So the thing is the show is easy to find. It's out there, and let's go ahead and say we recommend you do so.
Yeah. So this is what our third Cannell show now. We did the A-Team and
Hardcastle and McCormick.
And this is the first one to me that's actually held up. And I don't know if I expected it to. I think I remember because, the thing that appealed to me as a kid is still the part I like the least, which is kind of the wacky flying and stuff like that. The more superhero-y parts. But everything else really kind of stands up, I think. That maybe wouldn't have appealed to me quite as much as a kid. Like the relationship between the lead characters.
Yeah, which, creator Stephen J. Cannell has said that he wasn't at all interested in the superhero part. He didn't read comic books.
Yeah. I'm not going to say I take issue with that. I mean, it just seems like there's a little bit of that. Like you can feel it in the show a little bit. That thing you feel in the Incredible Hulk show too. And just like people doing these things who are dismissive of the genre.
Yeah.
And sometimes if you're new to it, you bring something interesting and that's fine. But I watched one interview where he actually also talked about, he called it he's like, well, it's kind of a BS genre. He's like, but really, when you think about it, Private Eyes are a BS genre too.
Right.
It was his bread and butter. So
right.
I guess he wasn't that dismissive. He just... A
little bit of self-awareness, but yeah.
He wasn't schooled in it in a way that Joss Whedon or whatever would be.
It's a little uncomfortable, I admit, watching him now. Like, there's an interview on the DVD set, and like you said, given other interviews where he is dismissive of it. I also would say, to put it into context, I was reading in Retrofan magazine an interview they did last year with star William Catt, and he pointed out something that I hadn't really thought of right away, but he points out that, like, at the time, he was hesitant to do this show because this was years before it became, cool to do like superhero movies, and there was more of a stigma to it, and it was probably still more fresh in the mind of like the George Reeves being typecast as Superman, Adam West being typecast as Batman, and having troubles getting credibility out of these superhero roles, and it wasn't the big business it is now. Granted, you had the Hulk series on the air at the time, maybe moving a little bit, but you also had failures like the Spider-Man TV series, our beloved Captain America movies, which there's a connection with
a couple connections
the show. But so it was a little bit different back then. So I'm going to give Cannell a little bit of slack.
Yeah.
I share your I'm a little squeamish hearing him be so dismissive of it, but he seems to be a little bit aware, like, okay, well, make the most of it. Even with all that, I will say this, though. I think you could make a case that this is one of the best superhero shows of all time.
I think so. I think you could definitely do that. And really, the thing I was watching when he was talking about it, he was sort of like, well, okay, I wasn't interested in it, but I never say no in the room, and I thought about it a little bit, and he found his way into it. And as a writer, I appreciate that he figured out a way, oh, how would I go about this, and what would be interesting to me, which is like, or what would it be like if I had this, suddenly had this suit and could do these things, and a lot of the humor, the sort of grounded situations of like your wife or girlfriend walking in and you're wearing this dumb costume.
Right.
Came from that, or making him a teacher even came from that idea of like, if you just make him a regular guy, which is really, it's sort of like he was doing the Stan Lee thing without knowing he was doing the Stan Lee thing.
Can I read you a quote that I found in that same Retrofan article? Thank you. It's quoting an author, John Abbott, who's written a series of books about TV and cult TV, but I guess he wrote a whole book about Cannell Productions and everything. And he made an explicit comparison between this prolific TV producer and Stan Lee. And what he said was, this is the magazine quoting from the book, in many ways, Stephen Cannell is to TV what Stan Lee was to the comic book industry. Both present us with heroes who are vigilantes, Robin Hoods, and anti-heroes. Flawed, vulnerable, tongue-in-cheek pastiches of harder, straighter fare. And he goes on to say, like Lee's 60s Marvel superheroes, Cannell's TV heroes, particularly those of the early 80s, Greatest American Hero, Hardcastle, and McCormick, the A-Team, Riptide, Hunter, are living in a halfway world, too real to be as phony as the fantasy environments of more straight-faced entries in their chosen genres, too fake to be confused with grim reality. Stan Lee took superheroes out of impossibly pure characterizations and make-believe locales and dropped them squarely in an equally fictional environment that more closely resembled reality. Cannell played the same trick with the TV hero. Quite a quote, huh?
Quite a quote, yeah. He said it much more in depth than I did.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a pretty good comparison.
Now, I didn't know if I got any of that out of Hardcastle and McCormick.
No.
But in this particular series, you can really see the comparison.
That's the thing, too, that I guess the last vaguely critical thing I'll say is that, to me, even though this is a superhero show, it's much more realistic or grounded, certainly than the A-Team. The A-Team is kind of absurd. And if you think about some of those later, like Renegade or, maybe lesser Stephen Cannell shows where it doesn't seem to be connected to reality at all.
Yeah, I don't see any sort of the ambition that we're talking about to do something with the genre. It just seems like in later efforts you just get genre, for better or worse.
I don't even know what genre the A-Team is, but it's like if those guys were running around doing the stuff they're doing, even though they're helping people, I still feel like it would be probably correct for them to go to jail, given the amount of legal weapons and rampant destruction they're involved in. But The Greatest American Hero has, the writing's pretty good, and it has, I think, 3 leads that are very good too, and good together.
They are, and they dispense with some of the things that annoy me most actually about the genre. And this is something we'll get into, but like, for example, the least favorite, I love Superman as a kid, loved Superman the movie. My least favorite thing about it was the pretense of pretending to use Clark Kent, even though that's an essential part of it. But just as great as that performance is, I've always complained about how Christopher Reeve made Clark Kent so bumbling, and they had to do that thing to fool Lois Lane. And in this show, they get rid of that right off the bat.
Right, and that's even the joke, right?
Yeah.
Like,
he even says it, yeah.
You're better than Lois Lane.
Yeah. A guy becomes a superhero, but instead of keeping it a secret from his loved one, he involves her and she becomes an essential part of what he's doing.
And he does keep it a secret from his kid that disappears after the first season.
Yeah, that's the... The kid apparently was not willing to be part of the team, so it's probably a good thing that he kept it from him, since they dispensed with him so quickly.
Although in the episodes that he appears in, he does influence what's happening. Like in the pilot movie, he says something that inspires Ralph to kind of give this a chance.
Yeah,
and there's the one with the alternate Lone Ranger.
Yeah,
he wants to go see this guy who played the Lone Ranger, who's a real guy who played him for 1 season or something, and Ralph gets excited about that, and that actually Ralph has been questioning doing the Greatest American Hero thing, and that sort of remotivates him.
Right,
but it's a distraction from the rest of the story. Like when I saw in the pilot, I was like, "There's a kid in this? What?"
Yeah.
And then I was like, this kid's not going to be around long.
They're going through like divorce, and there's custody stuff going on in the pilot, and
right, and Connie Salica's character Pam is his lawyer, but also his girlfriend.
Much more than a lawyer.
And his ex-wife is terrible.
Yeah. In another like premise, they sort of seem to de-emphasize the classroom setting too, which like in the first season they're finding ways to get the kids involved in everything, and even into the second season. But I haven't seen a lot of the third season yet. We talked about, but I think that they've pretty much phased out the kids. I mean, they refer to them, but they're not like along as main parts of the cast by the third season. It seems like.
Right. I mean, they're still around in some episodes, and most of them are different actors at that point, and like the interesting actors have left for greener pastures.
Yeah, like no. So the kid and the high school class, they do not actually appear in the episode that we picked to talk about. So I think we could talk about them, briefly here.
Yeah, like so the high school kids, the two main ones are Michael Pere, I guess is the way to say it. Eventually Eddie of Eddie and the Cruisers, and other roles. Faye Grant, she was in V. Is that her big?
Yeah.
And they're good. It's not surprising they went on to other stuff.
No, I think they were given types and turned it into something appealing, like in all these cases. Like pretty much all the kids, they're interesting to watch and appealing, even though they're kind of cliches at first.
Yeah.
Because they're troubled kids.
They're the sweat hogs, basically.
Yeah, and Ralph's got this special class, like a special education class it's called, and they're kind of like the ne'er-do-wells and the disciplinary problems that he's kind of is saddled with. But he's saddled with them because he's like kind-hearted and because he's a good person and is willing to make the effort with them.
Yeah, and I guess the school doesn't want to deal with it so much that he's got carte blanche to do whatever he wants.
Yeah, he's own...
taking them on these wild field trips.
Right. And I think that's something that maybe it became less and less convenient to... At first, they really made an effort to incorporate them and deal with the fact that he was a teacher. Like there's an episode I liked in season 2, the baseball episode, where he becomes a pro baseball player, a major league baseball player somehow. And they managed to get the kids involved in that and reference the fact that he's still a teacher. Like, and that's, I think in later episodes, they still emphasize the fact that he's a teacher, and he references the fact that, hey, I still have a job, but they don't bring the kids along all the time on these adventures, which is probably for the best.
Yeah. Because he is hiding it from them.
I mean, it was part of what made the show unique and its approach to this material, but at the same time, it becomes really unrealistic to have to deal with that. And it's probably better that they just don't reference him being a teacher as much, maybe, as it goes on.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's why a lot of superhero shows that go on kind of find a way for the characters not to have jobs.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and the comics do that too. It's like, well, at some point, you only have so much storytelling space, and unless it's Peter Parker, I don't want to see people have jobs necessarily.
Yeah.
I mean, in that case, that part of Spider-Man's appeal in the comics is his whole world of the supporting characters, and so you kind of want to see J. Jonah Jameson
right,
and Robbie and those guys.
Well, I think in this case, like going from the other side, is Robert Culp as Bill Maxwell, the FBI agent who's working, with Ralph. And I think the fact that he is a working FBI agent becomes something that they increasingly have to deal with and come up with explanations. And that's something that, in talking about like artistic license, I think you really just have to go with a lot of it because it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like sometimes he's a maverick working outside the system, even though he's like the consummate by the book guy. And then in other episodes, you realize that like he's considered like inside the FBI, they see him as like this Wild Bill kind of guy that goes off, even though that's not his person. I mean,
yeah, and sometimes they see him as a loser.
Yeah,
and sometimes they're suspicious of how good he is at his job.
Yeah, he's bringing in all these things. Yeah. He's solving cold cases and doing all this.
It seems like he's just. I mean, they show him in the office sometimes, but it seems like he's just wandering around LA looking for stuff to happen.
Right. He's looking for scenarios.
Scenarios, yeah.
Yeah. And I guess you could get away with that if, you're as successful as he is. But he's also got a contentious relationship with his superiors. I mean, he talks about, in this episode, he talks about, like, this is the 7th car that's kind of like a running theme that he keeps having to.
But then later in the season, there's only been 5 cars. So I don't know.
Yeah. You just kind of have to go with it. And really, they decide early on that they're not going to. He tells Pam, and Bill knows about it, but he's not going to tell the whole world about it. And they're just kind of going to rely on the fact that, like, people aren't going to believe somebody who says that they saw a guy in a suit doing this stuff.
Right.
And they decide not to go public with that.
And Bill tends to give people the option of telling the truth and getting put in a rubber room or not mentioning that part.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
and
right.
More often, quite often, they choose the wrong thing.
That's true.
And pay an extra price for it, but and so the basic setup in the pilot is that they both end up in the desert in Palmdale, California. I think Ralph is taking his kids on this ridiculous field trip. I mean, really, it's an overnight field trip, but with one chaperone.
Yeah.
But and Bill's out there looking for clues, I think, because his partner has disappeared, and then being drawn to the same place, and there's a UFO, and they give Ralph this suit that has all these powers, and Bill's supposed to help him figure out how to use them. And they chose Ralph because he's this good, kind person, but they see potential in Bill, just not enough. I think they see the potential of misuse in Bill's hands because he's by the book guy, but he's very, he's all just about the FBI, and he's sort of like a Reagan era or Reagan Goldwater sort of Republican and anti-commie, and
seems very set in his ways, and
and
doesn't necessarily see every angle of the thing. It seems like they made a conscious move pairing the probably lefty, the more humanist Ralph, the school teacher who deals with everyday people, with the more stereotypical conservative who is more law and order and not necessarily going to look at other angles of things. And
it's a little bit sexist, a little bit. He definitely judges, especially like Ralph's students. And
he's old fashioned.
He's old fashioned, and but he's to some extent softens as it goes, and or learns more from this relationship and from like Pam being her counselor. Being around. But they form this team, and Ralph, of course, immediately loses the instruction book. So he doesn't know how to use the suit, really. And I guess part of Cannell's idea was the power has to come from the suit, not the man. And yet, I would say, it seems like it's a little bit like, at least in the movies, the Captain America idea that whatever you bring to the suit, it's going to amplify not just your physical qualities, but the person you are.
Right.
So like in the first Captain America theatrical movie, the idea is that Steve Rogers brought his goodness to it, and that got amplified, and his thoughtfulness and all of that, and the Red Skull brought his fascistic need for power and all of that to it, and that got amplified. So it seems like it's the same thing here. Like that's why they chose Ralph and not Bill. Can you imagine Bill in that?
No, I think Bill would have a hard time imagining himself in it.
But, so there's a lot of conflict just between those clash of personalities, and then Ralph not knowing how to use the suit. And that's, again, the wacky flying and stuff. And I don't know, that gets kind of old to me.
Yeah, and actually, that's the one thing that kind of bothered me about this series, and that they never really satisfactorily explain as to why they wouldn't follow up, because they're clearly monitoring them. Like, why would they not come back and give him another instruction manual if they go to all this trouble?
At some point they do. They give him a second one.
They do, and then
he loses
it again.
And in the Greatest American Heroine, they mentioned they I guess they don't know that he lost the second one, because they say, as they're telling him he needs to pass on the suit, that he mentions that, and he's like, well, the aliens are like, well, we already gave you two.
Yeah.
You didn't lose the second one, did you? And he just kind of, well, no.
I think it's just something that I've got to overlook. It makes no sense, because they clearly make it clear in some cases that the aliens are watching them and monitoring them. And in fact, there's an episode where they make it pretty clear that they have replacements in mind for them if they screw up, and they kind of threaten them with taking it away from them. Yet they aren't helping them out by giving them the actual ability to use the suit. It makes no sense.
Right. And a lot of stuff with the suit doesn't make sense.
Well, and actually, I have another quote that I'd like to share, because the series was sold. To me, it was promoted a lot with like the scenes of Ralph crashing into stuff because he can't fly, and they play that up a lot in the first couple of episodes in the first season. Well, that kind of annoyed me a little bit, and I remember just even as a kid, it kind of bothering me that like, well, they should figure this out, or is he practicing, things like that. Well, our friend Robert Culp actually said, I think to the author of this article in an interview, the article says, the novelty of Ralph's terrified, shaky flights quickly wore off for the audience, Culp recalled. And then here's a quote from Culp. The very hook that made the series sell, and it made it work for the first year but became a detriment the second year, was that he couldn't work the suit. I mean, you have no idea of the mail and the talk on the streets. I like the idea of Culp saying, I mean, you have no idea of the mail and the talk on the streets.
I love the idea of Robert Culp walking down the street.
Yeah.
And, like overhearing people talking about this.
And him like grimacing, yeah. And he says, and this is Culp saying, when is somebody going to teach that a-hole to fly that suit? We all knew that it was going to come to a swift end, and it did. And so he says, and pretty soon what we did in the second year was start to accelerate his ability to find uses for the suit and make it work. And by the time we go to the third year, we didn't expect too many crashes and too many screamings and falling out of the sky. Only a few. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and I like the fact that, Culp was kind of annoyed by that too. But apparently there was this groundswell of people being frustrated with that premise.
I imagine William Katt was annoyed with it too, with having to film that crap.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like they reuse a lot of footage, but...
It does, and I think he said that, he wasn't like wearing the suit was physically uncomfortable and doing the stunts was physically, or what he did, that footage, it wasn't easy for him.
Yeah. So before we get into the episode, I think there's one other thing we need to talk about, general thing, which is the theme song, the greatest American theme song.
Yeah.
Which people our age enjoy that song, and of course it was a single. And, like it went to number 2 or something.
It did, yeah.
Co-written by Mike Post and Stephen Geyer.
Yeah.
Who, I looked him up. He's got a lot of credits for different stuff.
He does, and I think he's underappreciated, really. Mike Post was the one that I remembered being credited with, Mike Post and the singer.
Yeah.
But Stephen Geyer seems to be kind of forgotten a little bit.
Yeah, and boy, he's done a lot of stuff. And then, the singer, Joey Scarberry, who, this was really his only hit as a performer. Mm-hmm. It looks like later he wrote some songs that did well, and he's somebody. Mike Post was working with him and trying to get him out there, and it just didn't take. And based on the one Solid Gold performance I've seen of him on YouTube, it might be. I don't know if he was made for being he doesn't quite seem to have stage presence, but boy, he's got a great voice.
Yeah, not a star for the MTV era, which was starting to take off.
He's just sort of like a regular guy.
Yeah, like Christopher Cross. He's something that we talked, who was like huge until MTV came along, and then not so much. But Stephen Geyer did the Hardcastle and McCormick theme songs, like both versions apparently, like the lyrics to those.
Yeah.
And
Joey Scarberry sang one of those.
Yes.
He sang the back-to-back one.
And it's awesome that I just love the fact that there were 2 different theme songs for that show. But, and one thing that we've discovered, I'm sure, you have too, as we've watched the show, is that Stephen Geyer does all these songs that keep popping up.
Yeah.
Not in the episode we are going to discuss, but all these like great songs that are like so literal and could tell that they're specifically written for the show that Stephen Geyer does. So good for him.
Yeah. And, sometimes you watch a bunch of episodes of a show and it might get repetitive. You might get tired of it. The more I watch this, the more I love that song.
The song, yeah.
Yeah. Like everything about it, like the way it starts is a hook, just like the chords. Dun, 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 right there. With
like the footage of the ship.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
And then he starts singing and he puts so much heart into it, and just like when you sing the song to yourself, it doesn't. I don't put like the little. He just puts an extra bit into all of that.
I like the fact that you sing the song to yourself. Right? Do you sing the song to yourself while you're watching the show?
Oh yeah.
Nice. All right. Good.
Yeah. Or when I'm about to watch.
Yeah. That's good.
And then of course the chorus. Believe it or not, I'm walking on air. All that is great. And one of the things I started appreciating that is when he starts singing the who could it be. Mm-hmm. There's harmony vocals that sing ooh, 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 like underneath it as he sings that full line, and it's like, oh, that's really cool.
Wow.
And like all the instruments seem to be like doing what they should do, but in a sophisticated way, kind of highlighting parts of the melody or mirroring it in some way, not in an exact way, but like making sure it all stands out. And it's just a great little pop song.
There's a build to each chorus that works, just like an actual good song. And the quality of the whole opening sequence with the visuals, I like the font of the credits. It's a very 1980s kind of font, but it kind of, I get like a real nostalgic feel for some reason, like the way they introduced the cast, and it with William Katt, Connie Selica.
And Robert Culp as in a rectangle.
Yeah.
Bill Maxwell.
Yeah, it just all works. And that song really gives me a great sense of like a warm feeling of of remembering the show more than actually watching these episodes, but just that song. I think it was an emotional experience for me. Like at the time when I was watching it, I just loved that song. And I've mentioned the fact that I really responded to, Superman the movie. I got like an emotional sense watching that like every year. And I think Greatest American Hero was something that kind of reinforced it for me. It was on the same network that used to show Superman and everything. And just thinking, oh, this is superheroes, but there's something more to it. There's like you get that core of emotion, which is set up right from the beginning with that song. And yeah, it's classic. One of the best.
Yeah, and of course it inspired one of the many, many great George Costanza moments.
Of course, yes.
His answering machine message.
Yeah.
Which I was walking around trying to sing that, but I didn't know the words, so I kept singing at the end of it, like, believe it or not, it's just George, which is not what...
Yeah.
Believe it or not, I'm not here, I think is what he sings.
But, like, where could I be?
Yeah, where... And it's all awkward. I love that.
Yeah. Right.
And there's a clip of him on, the James Corden show, recording that on Kat Dennings' phone.
Wow.
She's like a Seinfeld fan, and she had recorded it from the TV as her voicemail message, and they're on the show at the same time. So he records Jason Alexander, and he does it with that extra little bit of New York accent that George has, and like awkward. And
wow, that's very cool.
It's great. He just had to he walks through the lyrics, and then he's like does it once.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
If nothing else, the theme song has ensured that the series has had a place in pop culture history. I think the show itself deserves a little bit more than just the song, but the song itself is immortal.
Yes. Much like The Suit, maybe.
Yeah, it could be.
And there have been, attempts to revive that haven't gone through, but revive the show, I mean.
Yeah, I think it's a concept that could definitely work again. But as we mentioned, such a big part of it is the chemistry of the leads that it would be difficult to duplicate. And part of me thinks, why bother?
Yeah, I think so.
I don't need to see another version of it.
No, I don't think so.
I do wish there was more of this, and that another thing that we haven't really touched on is it didn't get much budget. I don't think it got a lot of support from the network, and part of that was they didn't have a lot of money, which led to a lot of compromise, especially, I think, in the third season. And I wish that there were more episodes, and I wish that the show had more resources to do the productions with.
Yeah. So we've mentioned all the leads already, but William Catt, of course, was in Carrie. Later was on the Perry Mason revival with his real life mother, right?
Yes, Della Street.
Yes.
And his father was an actor too.
Right. And then Connie Selica as his girlfriend, eventually wife, on the show.
Yes. Finally, we get the third member of the Holy Trinity of.
Well, she was in the Captain America movie.
That's true. But it finally, like her show.
Yeah.
We get to, because we haven't gotten yet to Flying High, her show where she was a stewardess on CBS, which is funny because in that interview with Stephen J. Cannell, he mentions like casually, I'd seen Connie before and I'd seen Flying High, and like there's something like, really? Somebody did see that?
Yeah, the one I watched, he said they just cast her for the pilot initially, and she was so good, and he realized how good she was at comedy. That they decided to sign her right away. Of course, besides that, I think we talked about that. Maybe in the Captain America one too, she had been in it just seemed like a bunch of failed shows before the Logan's Run and
Beyond Westworld.
Beyond Westworld, yeah, and the Captain America movies and.
Right. We're trying to come up with something for her, and this seems like perfect. So, yes, we welcome her alongside Aaron Gray and Linda Carter.
Yeah, and she's really good in the show. I mean, I didn't remember enough of the show to remember. I didn't know that.
Right. She holds her own and makes the dynamic. The dynamic is great between the two guys, but when she's involved in there, she's never feels like a third wheel. She reacts appropriately to both of them and helps move things along. She's great, yeah.
Of course, Robert Culp, legend Robert Culp. My Spy and Mini Columbos. And
yeah, and if you're wondering...
Theatrical movies, I forget that, but I mean...
Yeah.
Bob and
Carol and Alice.
Yeah, and Alfonso.
Yeah. And he was on Trackdown, one of his first TV starring roles. He was in a Western, which... in the episode we're going to talk about sort of comes into play a little bit. But yeah, he was great. Kind of a favorite of ours, always watchable.
Yeah, and also wrote and directed some episodes, and which I guess he did on I Spy and other places. And did you see that right before he died, he was getting ready to do a Terry and the Pirates movie? He wrote and directed?
I didn't know that was right. I didn't know it was close, but I know that was one of his things. And I think he made a couple of references to that on I Spy. He referenced that every now and then, like he'd throw in a couple of things that maybe it was just him doing it. But I didn't know that. So it was like actually a possibility? Or?
Well, that's what Wikipedia said.
Well, hey, it's good enough
they were getting ready to film in Hong Kong.
Wow. I think we can agree that as far as you and I are concerned, I Spy was totally carried by Robert Culp. He was the whole show. There was never anything really interesting or charismatic or funny about it except for Robert Culp. And history will record that we always thought that I Spy was totally a Robert Culp show. Can I just say that?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So, he's... they're all great, and this is, in terms of memories, like I guess the flying and stuff was so or stuck in my memory so much that I thought Ralph was like a totally inept character in my memory.
I can see that,
but he's not at all. Like, I mean, he's kind of like he's kind and stuff, but he's got a toughness about him too,
and he's smart.
Yeah, and sometimes he's a grump.
Yeah,
like in this episode,
and he's
rightfully
brave.
so, but yeah.
That's something I want to ask you about later. But he shows it's kind of like the whole regular guy. I mean, it's kind of reminds you a little bit of the Captain America. You're bringing something to the suit, but he's put into extraordinary situations. But he shows like a courage. Like, yeah, he's got the suit, but he didn't ask for this, and he's in these dangerous situations, and he goes through it, even though he doesn't even know how to use the suit. He doesn't know what to face, but he goes and does it anyway, which really is kind of the definition of bravery and heroism.
Yeah, and you can see why Pam's with him. Mm-hmm. Like, he's not a goofball. I guess I thought he was just like a goofball.
Right.
And clumsy.
Yeah, and you know what? And that, again, and I'm kind of going back. It's funny. I seem to remember, like, seeing the commercials and, like, the build-up to it more than a lot of the actual individual episodes. But people could have been turned off by that because, I don't know. I'd have to go back and watch some of the promos and stuff. But they might have overplayed that a little bit. And people could have been turned off by that by thinking, well, this guy's a boob that doesn't deserve the suit. But no, it's quite the contrary. He, you could say deserves the suit. He just doesn't know how to use it, but not entirely his fault.
Yeah. In a way, I would say, Bill's more of a boob than he is in his own way. I mean,
his headstrong ways kind of cause more problems maybe than Ralph's incompetence with the suit.
Yeah. I think Bill is, there's something slightly sad about him underneath it. They don't always play that up, but
yeah.
I mean, he lives alone. He's just obsessed with his job. He doesn't really seem to be pursuing anything outside of his job.
Right.
He doesn't seem to have friends except for Ralph and Pam.
Right. I mean, the friends that come up are like people from his past or something, but current day, he seems to, lives a very solitary life. And maybe he likes that, but there's sometimes quiet moments where, you think, oh, maybe he's not made of stone.
Yeah. And in some episodes where things are not going well at the FBI, there's a sort of comedic desperation to him.
Right. Because that's his whole life, too. I mean, it's very important to him, and he wants to do it as a member of the FBI, not as his own, like being a superhero. Like, he prefers to do it from the FBI. I think that's one of the reasons he's doing it this way, is because he can be a little vainglorious sometimes, but I think he wants the institution to thrive and get like credit for stuff too. Yeah.
So should we get into the scenario here?
I think we should. I have a feeling there's like a lot more stuff we can say general about, but I think they'll come up probably a lot of it during the episode itself. Yeah, so the one we picked to talk about is called "The Shock Will Kill You," and it's a good episode because it has concentrates on the three leads. It also has, which we'll get into, the space shuttle, which was a big thing for many reasons in the 1980s. But this particular one was the 13th episode of season 2. It premiered February 10th, 1982, and it kicked off the night on ABC. It was followed by The Fall Guy and Dynasty. That's quite a lineup there. And NBC had Real People at 8 o'clock. Then comedy hour of Facts of Life and Love, Sydney, the Tony Randall sitcom, followed by Quincy, America's favorite medical examiner, at 10 o'clock. CBS kicked off the night with She's a Good Skate, Charlie Brown, like a figure skating, ice skating kind of deal. And then the rest of the night was Hooper, the 1978 movie, which just went from like 8:30 to 11.
The Burt Reynolds stuntman movie?
Yeah. So that was what it was in 1982 when this episode premiered.
Do you think Bob Culp and Burt Reynolds hung out at all? Chewed gum together, maybe?
That's an interesting question, because I think of Bob Culp as being kind of like a Playboy Mansion kind of guy.
Yeah.
And I don't remember Burt Reynolds really being at the Playboy Mansion. It seemed like almost there were two separate spheres that kind of coexisted maybe, and maybe they'd nod to each other every now and then, but didn't necessarily hang out together.
Right. And, Burt liked to go back to Florida.
Yeah.
Maybe not, yeah.
Cool. I could see Culp keeping it real on the West Coast while Burt's holding it down on the East Coast, maybe.
Yeah. And, nothing against Burt, but it seems like Robert Culp was pretty serious about into acting and the creative parts in ways that maybe Burt Reynolds wasn't as his career went on.
Right. Culp, just the fact that he wrote and directed episodes of these shows proves that he was invested in it.
Burt wrote lots of Evening Shade.
Yeah.
And had his little theater and stuff.
But Burt did a lot of movies that, maybe he wasn't as invested in, maybe directly.
Yeah, I don't know. And I don't know how much thinking he did. And even the ones he was.
Right.
About, bandits' motivations.
I'm interested to know, now that I think about it, if they were ever in something together, you'd think that their paths would have crossed a lot, like you say. And, Culp was a guest star in a lot of different shows. Maybe they were in a Gunsmoke together, I wouldn't be surprised, or something like that. So we'll have to have the crack research team take a look at that.
Yeah, let's get into this here.
Yeah, the shock will kill you. So do you want to lead us? I mean, we start with the space shuttle footage.
Right. Not very good space shuttle footage.
No, considering NASA footage is public domain, you'd think they could have gotten better stuff than this grainy. I wasn't even sure where they got this.
The first shot almost looks like it's left over from Buck Rogers.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe it really is. I mean, it's the same. Yeah. It's Universal, so
yeah, I think maybe you're right on that.
But then, the second shot is just terrible. It's just I don't know. Maybe because they're trying to show it flying in. There might not have been footage of the shuttle in space.
It could be that they had to use this stuff, but it's a little jarring, especially watching it now. I guess back in the day, it wouldn't have been as big a deal. But
because later, when it's in the atmosphere, that's definitely they use some stock footage, and there's a plane behind, a chase plane or whatever behind it. But
I think you're onto something. I think they had to combine some footage they had lying around with actual footage that they could get from NASA, but it doesn't look good.
No, but who cares?
Yeah.
But the shuttle has no power. They had sent it up to rescue some sort of probe, which later we do hear is a Venus probe.
Oh, that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I think they just got to get rid of this idea of sending probes to Venus.
Yeah.
It's a bad idea. I mean, I know they just are theorizing now that there's some sort of life in the atmosphere. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah.
Bacterial or microbial life or something.
I think this could be a trap to get us to send something else up there.
Send a probe back and yeah.
Yeah.
So they don't know if the astronauts are alive. They can't communicate with it. They're worried it's going to crash. And Ralph and Pam are watching this. I guess they're married at this point, I think. Somewhere in season 2 they get married, right?
Yeah, I don't know if they were or not, but it seems like they're living together.
Yeah. Which in season 1 they're definitely making pains to make sure that she's not staying over.
Yeah. Right.
Because it's 1982 or 3.
Doesn't he say later, Ralph says something like he called Pam to make sure, it makes it sound like they weren't together when this happened. Maybe she was at work or something, though. I don't know.
Oh.
Well,
yeah, I don't know.
It's possible that they weren't living together. I don't know, but...
And then Bill shows up, and he's already hot to trot about this, too.
Yeah, and I enjoyed that part of it, because Bill is trying to contact Ralph, we find out, but Ralph, we see, trying to call Bill. And I like the idea that they both see this, and maybe they're not sure exactly, but it's important enough. And I like the fact that they have this relationship where they both get kind of, antsy about it and want to get a hold of each other.
They're recognizing the scenario.
Yeah. And Bill comes storming in I've been trying to get a hold of you the whole time, and I was trying to call you, Bill.
Now, did you notice that Bill and Pam are wearing almost the exact same shirt?
I did, yes. I'm glad you brought that up.
I think there's some intent there because...
Really?
Well, because then when they leave, she has on a red coat that matches Ralph's costume.
Oh, wow.
I think, as the bridge between the two.
Wow, yeah.
She's got a little bit of Ralph and a little bit of Bill.
I was wondering that and in this episode,
because she's more on Bill's side in this episode.
This is more than maybe in any other episode. She is more on Bill's side and everything like that. And there's more of a contrast between her and Ralph. But I think you're right, because it can't be that they didn't notice it. But it's very weird. Even when Bill's kind of wearing a jacket to cover it up, but they're wearing very similar plaid shirts,
or red and black plaid shirts,
right down to the coloring and the pad. It's very unusual. Now let me ask you, who wore it better?
Oh, she did.
Okay. Yeah, I'd go with that too.
I mean, she's Connie Selleck. She makes a red plaid shirt and black jeans look pretty great.
She can make a burlap sack look like a cashmere sweater.
I think she could. So Bill knows it's going to crash somewhere near Bakersfield, or in Bakersfield.
Yes.
Which is...
About, I looked it up. It's about 111 miles, I think.
From L.A.?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that goes well with his timeline.
Okay. So they head out there. Now, they have no idea how Ralph is going to deal with this. And this is a running thing through this episode. He has a lot of doubts about it.
Yeah, he's expressing them, but they're just okay, we'll go do this, and you'll, put on the suit. I don't know. I don't know how to do it. Should I try to do the...
You can try, yeah.
What we'll do is we'll go out there, you'll put on the suit, do your thing, and, bring down the shuttle and make everybody happy, and we'll go home, and it'll be good.
That's pretty good.
He's got that inflection with, everything kind of raising at the end.
Yeah, and I like how, for this character, all the THs are Ds, like Ds and dads. And...
Yeah.
I don't know if they ever say where he's from, but
Yeah.
it seems like he's like from the city somewhere.
Yeah. And there's kind of like that matter of factly, like he does that all the time, but he kind of says that he lays it out. He doesn't really know what's going on, but that's what we're going to do, and that's the way it's going to be, But
it'll be like, Ralphie boy will put on the jammies, and
it's like that sense of like knowing you're going to do something, but kind of working it out as you're saying it, which I like.
Yeah, and Ralph keeps in the episode. He keeps saying, "Works for me."
Yeah, but he's like, I don't know if I can do that. What am I going to do? I don't know if I can stop a shuttle. I mean, that thing must weigh, like 20,000 tons or something. And I mean, he's kind of like nervous about it, like in a way you don't always see, but it's realistic.
Yeah, I would be.
It's one thing to find out, okay, you can maybe swat away some bullets or something, but it's another thing to control a space shuttle.
Yeah, and Bill points out that they carry it around the back of airplanes, which is true. That's how they would transport it.
Yeah, he says it kind of dismissively too. I like, no, it's nothing to worry about. You'll be.
Now, here's the thing: my dad, if you were here, would point out is that the space shuttle, when it landed, it didn't really use. It wasn't landing in the way an airplane lands. It's gliding in like a sailplane, and so there wasn't a lot of it wasn't using the engines at that point.
Right.
It just sort of is descending in a gradual way. So maybe it didn't need power. Now, of course, the people we find astronauts are dead, but
right.
And I don't think the pilots had to do much, from my memory, because he was a pilot. He would be snobby about stuff like that. They're not really pilots.
Yeah.
But that's a side note. They head off to Bakersfield to stop this. They kind of map out a place where Ralph could land it, bring it down, east of the city.
Yeah.
Which is important. And so he goes up there and he can't lift it or whatever, but he's steering it. Of course, he steers it west of the city.
Yeah.
But he does land it, which we don't see. But
yeah,
there's some footage of him flying kind of underneath it. That
they do enough.
It's fine.
They do enough to get by, but again, budget limitations are evident here.
Yeah,
and technological limitations too. I mean,
yeah. But then we see him like in a ditch that he's created with the shuttle, and he stands up, and his hair is like standing on end. And of course, if you know The Greatest American Hero, he's blonde curly hair, so it's really sticking out. Mm-hmm. He looks like Marjo. By the way, they didn't really have supervillains on this show. No. What if they had Marjo play the opposite?
Oh,
his opposite.
Oh, wow. Oh my gosh, that's an incredible idea, Mike. Beautiful.
They should have at least once. I know they were trying to have him solve real world problems, but
yeah,
one supervillain would have been okay.
Sure, especially if you have a dynamic performer playing it, and set up a credible premise there. Yeah. Oh, I would love to have seen that. What might have been.
Another what might have been.
Okay, I got to shake that one off. That was so good that I'm getting a little remorse now. I gotta focus.
But anyway, and his hair is wild, and he's got like electrical sparks coming off him, which none of this seems good. And Bill and Pam, are driving across town to find him, and he's walking by the railroad tracks, and they come up, and he's like, "Well, don't touch me because I'm all charged up from something." There was some charge on the outside of the shuttle, and he's charged up, and they're not sure what to do. And then I like Pam is the one who she's like, "Well, maybe you just need to be grounded when you touch the railroad tracks." And he's like, "I don't want to electrocute a train."
Yeah.
She's like, "Trains are grounded. Yeah. Don't worry about it."
Yeah.
Like she's on top of it, and so he does that, and it takes most of the charge away. But then we get the big gag of the episode. He's become magnetized.
Yeah, and I like this scene. Again, this is good because it looks like the charge is gone away, and I love the fact that the way that William Catt is playing this, because he's walking around kind of in a daze, like what's going on. You can see him processing it and just kind of like trying to figure out what's going on, and but still like. Part of it's like the mental confusion of what's happened. Part of it's probably the physical effects of, this kind of crash landing he's had and everything, and this great exertion that he's done. But it's great. And then I like the fact that like he's gotten rid of the charge, and Bill is like, well, there's still one thing is the touch test. He's like, as the senior officer, I volunteer, and just I kind of like that little thing. Like they show that he's not like cowardly or anything like that. He's willing to do this stuff, and it could be some danger, and he's doing it a little bit lightly, but still kind of seriously. He's like kind of like his brand of chivalry too, like not making her do it, but like, okay, I'm going to be the one. Let's test this out. Just everything about this was really well done, I think.
And then his watch flies off and sticks to Ralph's chest. As much as we're criticizing some of the other effects. I think all the like magnetizing things worked really well.
Yeah.
Like, and they reminded me of, that sort of 60s, 70s live action Disney, where they would do a lot of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like the Witch Mountain movies and things like that, where like floating things. And
Yeah.
just not super expensive or anything.
Yeah, I think it was fine. And I think you could do some nitpicking because I think the magnetism is a little bit inconsistent with how it plays out. But
yeah,
I'm not going to do that nitpicking because I think it was fine the way they did it in the episode.
No,
not
I
everything.
thought that too. It's like there's no way they could have like staircases or
right.
slam into them.
Yeah. I mean, I was kind of thinking like even like individual, I was kind of thinking part of it might be when he's not focused, like maybe he's taking some effort to not have things stick to him. And when he loses his attention, because like when they get into a hotel room, it seems a little inconsistent with like the effects of the but it's fine. And you point out like what they did with what they had, the effects it's pretty cool, and it's comical and believable, credible, I should say. So it's fine.
Yeah, and he sets off things in the car, the wipers and things in the car, and he becomes a nuisance.
Yeah.
But yeah, when they go to this hotel room and they're watching TV to get some information, and Ralph has to go in the bathroom because he messes up the TV signal. And then Bill comes in with some food, some takeout food. He's really happy about that too.
Yeah.
I mean, you see where it's gone. The plates are covered with the metal plate covers, and so you can tell what's going to happen with those. And like Ralph comes out to get his food, and like plate cover lands on his chest, and then all the silverware flies and hits his chest.
Yeah.
And just sticks there. There's not much you can do about it.
Right. And it's kind of like Bill and Pam just kind of like reacting like, what are we going to do about this? And they're a little put off by it, like a little scared, I think, a little bit too.
A little scared, a little annoyed.
Yeah. They start speculating as to what's going on here.
Do you remember one of Ralph's speculations?
The magic phrase?
Yes.
That it in the way he says it, like because he's like I've been piecing this together. He says I'm thinking maybe it could be some kind of like cosmic vortex.
What's a vortex? Bill actually says cosmic vortex.
Yeah. You think he didn't know what a vortex was?
I don't think he knew what a cosmic vortex was.
We know that for some people would think millions of people watching ABC that night scratching their heads because why would anybody know what a vortex is?
One person in particular
yes. would. But you and I know better.
Yes.
Now, I enjoyed that very much.
Yeah. And somewhere in that scene, Robert Culp did a good groan. He's really good at wincing and groaning.
Yeah, he is.
That kind of stuff. The other two big things that happen there. Pam and Ralph are worried that if Ralph takes off the suit, it could kill him. They're not sure, is it protecting him from his charge or what? And also Bill's gun flies and sticks to Ralph's belt.
Yeah.
Which definitely unnerves Bill.
What's funny is I don't think if we passed the part where they mention where he's having the counselor go through maps of, or is that.
Oh, that was early. It was, when they were driving out.
That's a funny bit I thought we might want to mention.
Yeah.
That, because he's asking a counselor, which he always calls Pam counselor, he's having her go through looking for some road maps. And she's like frustrated because all that's in there in the glove compartment is gun magazines.
Yeah. Which he says he does. He keeps for stakeout so he can do the crosswords.
Which is pretty funny.
Yeah.
And like the way he rattles off, and like, for example, you need a 6-letter clue for a German gun,
And she gives a guess.
Yeah. She guesses like...
she's a Luger. Which
like, no, Mauser or something.
Yeah. I don't think either of those are 6 letters.
Yeah. To be fair, she doesn't have the grid in front of her. It was probably difficult, but...
There's a scene at this Air Force base nearby where the investigators go into the shuttle in hazmat suits and find some goo, and it's a rather long sequence.
I was going to say, it's a pretty lengthy sequence. It's not particularly well lit, I'm sure, by design.
Yeah. And one of them gets killed by something.
Mm-hmm.
And then back at the hotel, Ralph is pacing, and I guess they wrapped up the silverware and stuff in a blanket.
Yeah.
And as he paces, the blanket moves along.
Yeah, so the blanket is sort of a semi-barrier, but...
Yeah, it's a
funny visual.
Yeah, and Pam and Bill are trying to eat their meals, but I guess I don't even know what the meals were. 'Cause I thought they were sandwiches, but they're not sandwiches because Bill complains that he has to have a bread sandwich.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Was there like something metallic in there that he can't eat now? He's mad.
Right, yeah.
Man, I had a perfectly good, copper sandwich, and the kid's got it stuck to his chest, and I got to eat a bread sandwich now.
I mean, is there a protein on the plate I'm not seeing?
Yeah.
All I know is the bread and coleslaw.
Yeah.
And the coleslaw they can't eat because they don't have silverware.
Yeah.
And I get there must be a piece of chicken or something that they can't eat, or steak. I'm sure.
Yeah. Didn't they get
I'm sure
like
Bill
some kind of,
doesn't eat anything but red meat.
didn't they have some kind of plastic like bowls or something, and like a plastic? I don't know.
Yeah.
But they're frustrated. Yes.
And Pam. Pam's like, it's not that we don't love you anymore.
Which is kind of an odd thing to say, but well intentioned. But I was like, oh,
Yeah, I don't know.
was that even up for discussion?
Yeah. And then the lights go out, and of course I think it's Ralph's fault. And he takes a light bulb out of the light, and it lights up in his hand. And then it turns out like the power's out all around. So they get in the car and they drive out to this Air Force base, and Bill's just like, that's what you'll do. You'll break in.
Yeah.
And you'll find out what's going on.
Yeah.
Easy peasy or whatever.
Like in a recurrent theme, and like Pam keeps saying, well, we'll work something out, and just kind of like, clearly she's unsettled, but her kind of thing is just say, we'll figure something out.
Yeah. But then, when Ralph airs his worries, she's more like on Bill's side, like kind of nodding along with Bill.
Yeah, it's like it's something they got to do. And let me go back to, because that's one of my favorite scenes, is like early on when this is first starting and they're trying to figure out how to stop the shuttle and everything. Ralph keeps raising these questions, and they're not listening to him, apparently. They just keep going on and not addressing him directly. And, Ralph actually stops their car physically as Bill starts to drive it away. And Bill kind of sighs and says, look, I have been listening the whole time. And he says, there is an answer. The answer is, I don't know. He says, you're just going to have to do your best, And I really like that scene, because it was kind of like you see like Ralph's frustration, and which keeps recurring. It's like he doesn't feel like they're listening to him really, and he's saying this stuff, and they're not really directly addressing him. But the reason is it's because they don't have an answer for him, and really, but they just know they have to do it. Again, part of being a hero, it's like, hey, this is a tough situation. We don't have a real great plan, but we got to do something.
Yeah, they're both right. They're all right.
Yeah. Yeah, he's got every right to be nervous about it, but they kind of prodding him along, and maybe they could have been a little bit more conscious and actively aware of his concerns. But
yeah, and Bill's he's playing the role. He's the role of coach there.
I think he was not trying to be dismissive, but he genuinely thought like the best thing to do is just plow through, because if I don't have an answer for this, let's just go on and we'll just go through this way and we'll figure it out along the way.
Yeah. Rather
than sit down and he's not the one to have necessarily a 10-minute discussion about making him feel better about it. Just like, let's just go do it. Let's get there and do it.
Right. So Ralph sets off some car horns, and but then he goes invisible. So that's one of his powers. Mm-hmm. We haven't really talked about his power. I mean, the flying, there's some super strength, bulletproof. The suit is.
Yeah.
His face isn't. And he can turn invisible sometimes.
Yeah, that was some of these weren't there right away, but
at least in one episode there's some pyrokinesis.
Yes.
It doesn't work very well.
And he can see like sort of like telescopic vision, but like psychic visions of things that are going on.
Yeah, holographs they call them.
Right.
And, it's a little bit of that thing with whatever's convenient for the episode.
Yeah. And again, in not having the instruction manuals is a convenient way you can always develop new powers as you need them.
Yeah.
Have them be surprises.
That's pretty clever, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
It seems to me they're inconsistent about how all that works. So in the sense that a lot of times, especially in the first season, it's like, even if he has a suit on under his clothes, he has to take his clothes off in order for it to work. Like, that to me doesn't make, other than maybe a requirement for the flying.
Yeah.
I can see that. But then there are other episodes where he can holograph by just having the suit on under. And I assume the baseball one, I mean, he's not walking around in that suit.
Right. He's got
a uniform, right?
Exactly.
So, and maybe it did seem like in the second season they dispense with some of that too, because there's a lot of, in the first season, him struggling to get out of his clothes, and either in public places or just they won't go over the boots, which are part of the costume, and it's like, well, why do you have to? I guess I've read too many comic books.
Yeah.
Why do your clothes have to be off? Like, why does a shirt covering that make it less powerful?
That's another kind of thing that you wonder if maybe they were a little bit dismissive of the genre, that maybe they would have bothered to figure out some of those things. But
yeah. Anyway, he turns invisible. He breaks the lock of the fence, goes in, and then we get a little a scene with some military officers discussing what's going on.
One of the officers, sadly underused in this episode, is Leonard Lightfoot.
That's right, Genius.
Genius Award-winning Leonard Lightfoot, who won for his role in Silver Spoons.
That's right. Now, I think the general, I guess he's a general, they're all good, but it's a funny scene Mm-hmm. Like they're just all really like bewildered and frustrated. But then there's like the other guy. I know the character's name is Nelson. Something about him really tickled me. Just the way he was. So he's sort of like.
Is Nelson the one that
he's not he's Leonard's superior, but he's not the.
He's the one that's trying to get them to face the fact that, look, there's something weird going on. We might not like it, but I've got, two dead astronauts that tell me.
Right, and he's just like weirdly frustrated by everything.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and the lights are off at first, and then they come on, and like there's a printer running without being plugged in. And for some reason, I just didn't follow. Oh, well, yeah, Ralph's in the room, but he's eavesdropping. They have photographs of the creature and everything. And so he sees that, and he goes back and reports and learns that this thing is moving through these power tunnels that go all the way to L.A. And we also see some workers in the tunnel, and one of them get killed by this thing.
Yeah, the tunnel scenes are shot kind of like more horror movies kind of things.
Yeah.
Like monster movies.
Yeah, and they're these big tunnels with all these conduits. Definitely some intensity there. And some of the effects later are interesting. I mean, cheap, but they work.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are some tentacles and things that maybe aren't great. As we know from Jaws, you don't need to see it to be scared.
Right. That's what they say, yes.
As much as... Like, I think Bill is really funny reacting to all this stuff, but I don't understand why he's so skeptical of it.
I had the same thing.
They know aliens exist.
Yeah.
Their whole life is based on the fact that aliens exist.
This happens every time that there's like one of these like weird creature episodes, because this sea monster episode.
Yeah.
He like totally doesn't want to believe it.
Right.
And yeah, he's too dismissive of it instantly.
But he says, space monsters, I'm going to get sick. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's classic.
And this is also when he says, we got to dope this thing out.
Yeah. Right. Maybe it's kind of like, I guess you could see it as Bill Maxwell's way of, again, he's like so transparent and open with things. Like he doesn't have like a whole lot of internal like stuff going on. Like this is his way of talking through it because he can't believe it. And deep down he knows that it's there, but he doesn't want it. He's so like by the book and used to being like a regular conventional lawman that he doesn't want to acknowledge it. And this is his way of like trying to deny it, like arguing with Ralph about it.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Yeah, he's thinking out loud.
Yeah, but it bothers me too. I mean, that's kind of it's totally weird. Like after all of the stuff that's happened with these aliens, you're worried, and plus the fact that that something weird happened to the space shuttle that nobody can explain. Yeah. Got to be something.
So they stop, and Ralph has to get out of the car so they can listen to the radio and find out what's going on. And they hear the power outages are moving, whatever, south or whatever. So they're like, well, we should go to this other power station, and maybe we can lure it there, or it's on its way there, and we can amp up the power there, and it'll lure it there, and Ralph can fight it. So they go there, and Ralph goes in, and Bill has another good like a line about like, it's like one of those movies, where, the monster just go blah.
Yeah. You like spill your popcorn or something. Okay, now let me ask you this, because I think it's around this time that this question comes to my mind, where they're getting their plan to go down to Los Angeles eventually and stuff. The question I have is Ralph being a little whiny at some point? I mean, I was with the space shuttle thing, I was like, and I'm not saying he is or isn't, but he kind of keeps raising these objections to everything and stuff. And like a little bit later, we find out, he's actually scared, and that's one thing. But when he's in the backseat of the car, he comes off as a little bit whiny, and even like Pam seems a little frustrated with him at a couple of points. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I sympathized with him, and I can understand though why they would be annoyed. And there's like that one of those scenes where like he's like, I think I'm handling this pretty well. And Bill says a similar thing, and then she's just like put out with both of them.
Yeah.
She's like, now that we all know how well we're handling this, let's focus on what's going on.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things that put it maybe just one thing over the top for me, was him like seeking reassurance from them. I think that's maybe what it really is like he really needs them to kind of pat him on the back a little bit and just kind of, or hold his hand a little bit. But him saying that was a little much, and I was just kind of like, is he being a little on the whiny side at this point?
Yeah. I mean, he definitely can be a little bit of a sourpuss.
Yeah, it's worth questioning. I mean, I give him credit for doing all this, but now he gets it together though, and does everything. But
right, and like he goes in that power plant, and again, it's kind of shot like a horror movie, but it's too late. Line's been cut, and I think there's a dead body there.
Yeah, he finds a dead body that, like, a la a horror movie again, like actually falls like in front of him, and he recoils from it. I mean, he doesn't do like a Jamie Lee Curtis scream or anything, but he's got discomfort on his face, and I kind of like it. I kind of like the fact that shows visible, fright at some of these things.
Yeah. It's later he's even more scared, and I think it's good because it grounds it to he's still a guy, just a regular guy. So they go back to Ralph's house, and Bill says they got to figure out a way to put the kibosh on this thing.
I love that.
Yeah. And Ralph goes in the bathroom. He's going to shave, which, I mean, even the fact that he thought he could do that.
Yeah.
It's just going to stick to your face, right?
You would think, unless he's got some kind of will he can exert that. I don't know.
I mean, I guess maybe if his face... Well, nothing was sticking to his face, so maybe it's just the suit is magnetized.
Could be.
But no, because then when he tries to wash his hands, he gets shocked.
Yeah.
But that kind of gives him an answer, like, oh, maybe we can use that on the monster. And they decide maybe they need to lure it to a dam. And Pam, from one of her law cases, knows where all the power plants are.
Yeah, she was apparently suing every... It's kind of vague the way she says it, but she makes it sound like they were suing like every utility in the state or something.
Yeah, but I like how involved she is in this episode.
Yeah,
sometimes she's not at all.
It was good because Bill was thinking they were going to have to break in somewhere to get like the records of where everything is and stuff, and she's like, "No, we don't have to do that. I know where they are." And he's like, I think he shows like he's actually impressed by it.
Yeah, the little bit of an interview I saw with him about the show, which he seemed very proud of. He said he thought Bill was a little bit in love with her.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
And that, it was never written that way or anything, but he just played it that way. And he mentioned a scene, I think it's like the second episode, where they're like in some safe house and there's no food really. And he said that like on the day acting, they were in the cabinets, they found some dog biscuits. And so Bill is eating they worked it into the scene and he's eating dog biscuit. And she's concerned about him. And he's like, and we were able to have this moment where I, looked at her and showed something in my eyes. But he had a lot of respect for his co-stars. And
that's good. I give Robert Culp, the writer, credit for having the discipline not to write an episode where Pam falls in love with him.
Right.
They have to deal with that. Or she's under some kind of like spell and has feelings for him. Or maybe he tried that and no, we're not doing that one. Okay.
Listen, counselor, you're like a daughter to me.
Another thing I like about this, too, is that I love about the character is after they hit on this plan, just how enthusiastic Bill gets about it. He can be frustrated and he can be a little cranky sometimes, but once he can latch onto something that he thinks is a good plan, he's all for it, and he gets so excited about it and like happy to do it. I like that.
Once he dopes out a good scenario. So they head out there, and they're almost to the dam, and the car breaks down. So they open a manhole cover, which of course sticks to Ralph. And then they send Ralph down there and say, the dam's 2 miles this way. And so he heads off, and they have to find a way. Bill and Pam have to find a way to get there. And happens to be a guy riding by on a horse.
Of course, yeah.
And Bill commandeers the horse.
Yeah.
And they ride off. It's cool.
That horse is now federal property.
That's right. He's very take charge at this point.
I love the way he does that all the time. He flashes the badge right away and doesn't waste time. He just politely but firmly takes what he needs.
In The Greatest American Heroine, he flashes his badge in Canada, and apparently it is just as effective there.
Oh, that's great. I love it.
I don't know if you have jurisdiction in Newfoundland. And then we get kind of scenes, cross-cutting between them. And Ralph encounters another dead guy and in these tunnels, and he holographs the creature at one point. Meanwhile, Bill and Pam go to the dam and charge in there and get everybody out of here and make this one guy stay behind so they can fill up the reservoir so they can dump the monster in there, which eventually Ralph does.
Yeah, I mean, you see a lot of, like you talked about, some of the effects, kind of these weird camera effects and stuff of Ralph versus the eel. I think of it as an eel. I think Bill calls it a squid. It's an electric squid at one point.
Yeah.
But the military guy you were talking about said a rough comparison would be like an electric eel or something.
Yeah,
It
seems like it has tentacles, and then there's these weird optical effects that look like a giant eyeball. I don't know what's going on. Yeah,
and they're doing a pretty good job of showing chaos, sort of in the tunnels and stuff in the fights. But the one point where it really loses it is how it kind of falls apart a little bit, effects wise and visual wise, when they actually have to depict Ralph getting the creature into the water. That's a little sloppy, and it's not really clear, and it's clear that it's not clear what's happening, and I think it's evident that they just couldn't really do that convincingly, and they kind of have to fudge it a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
It sort of dumps into the water, sort of, but you don't really get a good shot. You don't really get that good shot of what you used to, now with CGI and everything. You'd get a great shot of him, struggling with it and, physically carrying it and putting it into the water, and this time it's a little more loosey-goosey than that.
Right.
But I thought the chaotic, like, actual scenes of him struggling with the creature are a lot more effective, and they're kind of taking advantage of the fact that it's dark and kind of just make it seem like what's going on and the uncertainty and, like, fear of it. It works a little bit more of that. It's only, like, the resolution of it that it kind of falls apart a little bit. But he gets the job done. That's what matters.
Yeah. And then they're at home again. Kind of, I don't know if they're working on a new scenario or they're just kind of wrapping things up. But, Ralph is no longer magnetized or charged or anything. He's somewhere along the line, he destroyed all his appliances. But
yeah.
And Bill does say, I love it when you can dope out a scenario as efficient as this one.
Yeah. There's
they were going to use in the A-Team.
Yeah.
George Papard was just a little...
Yeah, you know what? There's no good memes with I love it when you can dope out a scenario as efficient as this one. I think we need to make that
one. Yes.
I want that on a T-shirt, too. Let's make that a thing.
Yeah. And then Ralph and Pam get a little romantic, and Bill makes his exit.
Yeah.
Ralph trips. He trips, and he's walking over to her. He trips and falls kind of on her. And then they kiss, and he shocks her, and he's like, well, it's static from the carpet.
Yeah. I think Bill's like, it's being clumsy is what it is. And he was kind of like starting to pack up his stuff as they started getting like a little frisky. Like he's like, and I kind of like that, the way he's playing. He's just making his way out of there and kind of goes out with like one little, like last, like kind of like grumpy kind of way.
And then Pam's like, no, it's technique.
Yeah.
I forgot, like before at the dam, Ralph kind of, he kind of puts Bill in his place a little bit, or or it's when he says, I love it when you can dope out a scenario this efficient.
Oh, and then Ralph kind of goes through all the stuff. Oh, yeah, like all the times you said, I don't know, and we'll just figure it out along the way and everything, kind of like exposing the fact that they didn't really dope it out efficiently. They just kind of winged it. Is that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ralph calls him on that, which is appropriate.
And that's like before the home scene, and I get there's like a freeze frame there, like they glare at him, and then the home scene is sort of like a tag.
Yeah.
Because that at that point, Bill's just sort of being a little like, I don't know, snotty about it or something. Yeah, it all worked out. But a really good episode.
It is a really good episode. It had like a lot of different elements, and one thing that I think maybe now would be a good time to bring this up, because one thing that always comes up when you read about the show is the creative tension that Cannell kept talking about between, like, the network wanted more fantastic, like, Monster of the Week stories, and he wanted more regular guy stories. And yet we've, seen this in this. I think you could count this as one of those creature episodes. I think they found a good way to incorporate it, and it turned out pretty good to me. Like one of the show's better episodes, actually.
Yeah, and he co-wrote this one with Frank Lupo, who was involved in the A-Team. I think maybe co-created the A-Team.
Yeah.
And the story was by Patrick Asbury, who co-created Hardcastle McCormick.
Yeah.
And directed by Rod Holcomb.
Yeah.
Who, of course, directed the second Captain America movie.
Right. The great Rod Holcomb directed this with brio and did his best with some of the limitations, I think.
I think he directed a lot of these.
He
might have been the main director.
The writer, or the story, Patrick, was hands.
Apps. Yeah.
Yeah, so apparently he was like a self-described ski bum who just, I guess, sent a couple of like spec scripts of like MASH or something to Cannell's office. And so he kind of read them almost by happenstance and liked him and brought the guy on. I just think it's interesting because, and then he went on to this great career, and he gave, Cannell a lot of credit, but I think even he was kind of wary about doing like superhero shows, but he said that, like, I think Stephen J. Cannell pitched him on doing the show. And it's just funny, like this theme that kept cropping up, because William Catt said that he didn't really want to do a superhero show, but Stephen J. Cannell pitched him on the show. And it's like, seemed like, boy, this guy must have a very persuasive way about him, because all these people around him like seem to enjoy working with him and talk about how persuasive he was to get to do these things. So this guy, the former ski bum or whatever, wound up writing a lot of episodes of the show too.
Culp really seemed just into it, though. I didn't get anything from him of like not wanting to do it. I think he wanted to be, to grow, and the network, to put it in the parlance of Bill Maxwell, put the kibosh on that.
Yeah, it seems like you say, he was enthusiastic about the show, but very disappointed and doesn't feel like the network gave it a fair deal. And I'd have to go look into a little bit more detail, but it certainly doesn't seem like it, that it changed time slots. It was, preempted, and like I said, it was canceled, I think, without anybody getting any notice. So yeah, I think it seems like there was some disappointment there, especially among them. I don't know what Cannell felt about it, the cancellation. Maybe he was a little bit more ambiguous about it. But anytime he got something on the air, I'd think, yeah, let's keep it going.
Yeah, I know. I think with the Hardcastle McCormick, we talked about that he had some failures at ABC, and like that was his last failure.
Yeah,
and the A-Team. I mean, I think the A-Team was his sort of last chance.
Yeah, and actually he mentions. I just remembered on the DVD interview, he talks about Carsey and Warner, like that team. They were the ones
they were running ABC. At the time?
They were in. They had I forget what their title was, but they were kind of responsible for developing projects and stuff. And they were the ones that told him. And then once they left, he makes it sound like everybody that came after, like once they were gone, he knew they were in trouble, and then it became worse as far as like fighting, as far as what stories to do.
The other thing Culp said in one of those Academy interviews was that there was still more to do with that character. Like he said that Carol O'Connor had said about Archie Bunker that he got him to a place where he could do anything with him. And he's like, I hadn't gotten to that place yet, but I wanted to get him to that place. And not just because the characters are vaguely similar, but, I think he saw that there was more he could do.
Yeah, like make out scenes with Connie Selica.
Sure.
No, I like that he had that. It's cool that he had that frustration and, just that in a good way, just like, I could have done more with it. And
and then they did try that Greatest American Heroine thing, which I was a little let down by that, watching that.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. It sounds like kind of a disappointment. It was like 4 years or 3 or 4 years later on a different network, and just
like the beginning of it plays a little bit like a clip show, and then the premise, Ralph gets exposed. The world knows about Ralph, and he gets a little big-headed about it, and starts going on the Tonight Show and the Dick Cavett Show and stuff. And of course, they don't show any of that, but I just love it. Like someone actually says, "Oh, you were great at Dick Cavett." But so the aliens beam him and Pam up, and they say you have to go. We'll make the world forget you, except for Pam and Bill, and then you need to go find someone else. And so then there's sort of a montage of Bill combing FBI records and stuff, and Ralph looking around. And the aliens is one of the best things in it. Ralph's like, "Well, what about Bill?" And they're it's like Robert Culp is playing one of the aliens. And they're like, "We think he's best in his support role."
Yeah.
But Ralph, they just show Ralph. He keeps looking at this one woman, and I don't know how he makes the initial connection. Like she works at a daycare, but he doesn't have a kid there. I mean, his kid would be like 12 or something by then, anyway. And she's and the actress is fine and stuff, but then and there's like a training montage with Bill that's kind of amusing. But the end, it's really the Pam of this show is going to be the woman's precocious foster daughter.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yes.
And of course, played by Danielle Spencer from What's Happening. Yep.
No.
Oh, okay.
I don't know the actress's name. She looks familiar. She's got bangs and pigtails and round glasses. And is very very smart for her age. And one scene of Robert Culp putting up with an annoying kid is entertaining, but a whole show?
Yeah. Sounds like maybe they should have just left well enough alone in that case.
They should have gotten like Art Hindle or something.
Yeah.
To play
the precocious child?
Yes, the precocious child, sure. The boyfriend who has to be the support there.
Well, I will say that this is twice in this podcast that I've been very impressed and amused by the man in the street. First, for going up to Robert Culp and complaining about Ralph's inability with the suit on the show, and now with people on the street going up and telling people about watching the Dick Cavett show the night before. I didn't know that was a thing that happened in the 80s, but right. I guess it was.
Apparently, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, anyway, I ended up watching the first season of the show of Greatest American Hero and selections from seasons 2 and 3. And I'll probably go back and try to fill in the gaps. The show makes me feel good.
Yeah, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I think to kind of go back to something we were talking about with the monster episodes, The Beast in the Black, which is kind of like a haunted house episode, and something else happens in that episode I won't say, but it's kind of like a scary episode, and a lot of it really plays out like a horror movie. And I think I told you that I love the first half more than the second half. I thought the first half was great, but actually William Catt said, according to this Retro Fan magazine, said that it was his favorite episode.
Well, he's done a few horror things. I mean, he did Carrie, obviously, but
that's right.
He also did a movie called House.
House, yeah. So that's another vote in favor of the creature and more fantastic episodes that apparently the network was forcing on them. But I think most of them went pretty well, the ones that I've seen.
Yeah, I still question. I mean, I believe that in a way, but some of the idea that they're going to solve everyday problems, even in the first season, most of the problems are like, these sort of, KGB issues and things like that, like spies and submarines and, well, that's all one episode. But, a lot of them are pretty big problems. He's not using the suit to solve his students' problems usually.
Right. Well, and on the DVD segment, Cannell mentions the baseball episode I like, which I think is the season opener of season 2. And he's kind of proud about it. Like he's mentioning like, oh, we got into like, there's corruption in Major League Baseball. Like that's an issue that he was proud of like tackling. And it's an interesting issue. It's kind of weird that they managed a way to work the suit into that. And it's not entirely convincing, but I really like the episode. But it's funny because he's proud of that. But like you said, it's not like a regular guy thing really. Like, I guess maybe it is. I mean, they do say in the episode it's the national pastime, and I think Bill is like really concerned about what's going on, and he's the one that like sells Ralph on how important it is. Although Ralph loves the opportunity to play baseball.
Can you imagine Bill's reaction if he doped out a scenario about doping in baseball?
Ooh. I can. I imagine he would be very upset with doping in baseball.
And yet, how was he okay with Ralph cheating, essentially?
Yeah, wearing the suit and throwing a 200-mile-an-hour fastball.
Yeah.
He was.
That is a thing that comes up in some episodes, that the risk of either of them using the suit for ill gain. But that is very tempting to Bill to kind of push the limits of what they're doing with it.
Which is kind of weird, yeah. They kind of imply a couple times they're worried that he actually did do it. Like with the stocks and there's a segment in that Beast in the Black episode, I think, where they find something that might be valuable and they worry that he did the wrong thing with it. And it turns out he didn't, but
because they were worthless.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they kind of like leave it ambiguous like that, which is weird because he's usually so by the book, but it's good. One thing I want to mention, because talking about the baseball episode made me think about is how, the characters of Pam and Bill are great, but Ralph and William Catt is great too. And he's really a likable guy, like we said. But one thing that keeps cropping up in a lot of these episodes is like his sense of like, and like we keep saying like the regular guy thing that they keep saying, right, is part of the premise, but also a sense of wonder. And like sort of like that thing of like he's still like excited by all of it. And one thing I like that they do a couple of times is they give him the opportunity to explore things, to be curious about things, and to do things because of the suit. Like the baseball episode, it's almost kind of they kind of go for like a bittersweet ending, but you can tell he's like he was happy. He was getting a little like puffed up about it, and then it goes away quickly, and they kind of like, well, fame goes away in an instant. He's like, yeah, but I'll still remember, and he kind of gets this look, and little things like that keep popping up, like that he doesn't lose his like the regular guy sense ultimately, but just he's got this sense of wonder about everything, and like he still can marvel about things and appreciate the power that he has and what the suit gets him. I really like the fact that they do that, and he never loses that.
Yeah, and I like the sea serpent one. He gets so worked up about that.
Right.
There's a sea serpent, and I'm going to find it.
Right, like the sense of discovery, not so much like the fame of it, but just like this cool thing that we're going to prove, and like the science aspect of it too. Just one more thing that we didn't mention that I kind of want to point out because it's something that I'd forgotten all about. The lawsuit that DC Comics filed against the Greatest American Hero, which I've seen at least one reference to make it imply that maybe that hurt the show and maybe ABC was reluctant to invest more resources into it because of that. Seems to me like a totally frivolous lawsuit. DC seems so eager to protect Superman and everything, but I think they eventually ruled in favor of, Greatest American Hero, but DC was claiming that the character was too similar to Superman, which is absurd, I think, to anybody that would actually watch the show.
Yeah, and at that point, you're, 45 years into Superman? I think enough things have copied it by that point.
Right.
It's not like, I don't know how I feel about they did the same thing with the Captain Marvel / Shazam character, and that lawsuit went on for years, and I mean, they really did destroy a competitor with that. But that was in the same era as the original creation of that character. By this point, there were, hundreds of superheroes.
Right.
And some of them wore capes and could fly. I don't... And the fact, of course, that Ralph doesn't have the powers, he gets them from the suit. Right there, that's a huge difference.
Yeah. Reading about it now, it just amazes me that it got as far as it did. It should have been dismissed right away, I think. But, you get lawyers and money and Not all lawyers are corporate weasels. We know one in this episode,
right, yeah.
Good old Pam, but that seems to be really an overzealous defensive. I guess that's what you do if you're a big company and you're protecting your interests, but that seems absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. DC or Warner Brothers they were kind of getting Siegel and Schuster lawsuits was probably around the same time against them.
Right. And I remember being aware of that even as a kid, like that there was something going on as a comic book reader, because I think it was in probably like, comic news as it was back then and stuff. And just, it's a shame if that had any relationship to like production difficulties or the show's success. I'd like to think it didn't, but I just wanted to point that out there as something that may have had an impact.
Okay. I'm ready to tie a ribbon on this scenario. File it away.
Yeah, let's do that. Put it to bed, and we'll go on to the next rodeo. This episode brought to you by Red Jammies. They're super. This episode also brought to you by Bill Maxwell's Gun Magazine Crossword Puzzle Dictionary. This episode also brought to you by Venus. Please stop with the probes. Join us next time for another exciting episode of Battle of the Network shows. Learn more, leave feedback, and suggest future episodes at battleofthenetworkshows.com. Follow us on Twitter at BatNetShows, and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Battle of the Network Shows.